Welcome to the Optimal Bio podcast. At Optimal Bio, we don't just balance your hormones, we balance your whole body. Our conversations range from nutrition to medicine with an emphasis on wellness tips to support your health journey. If you like what you hear, find us on the web at optimalbio.com and follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode.
Thank you for joining another episode of the Optimal Bio podcast. Today, I'm joined by Tanya Nix, our NP in our Greenville, South Carolina office, to talk all things sleep. So excited to talk about sleep today.
So there's nothing like a good night's sleep. We all know how we feel when we do have good rested sleep. We wake up energized the next day. We can focus, we can concentrate. The day usually goes better as planned. But when we don't have that sleep, there's a lot of things that take place. And we feel like crap the next day, and we can't function, and we're just not at our best. So sleep is not just resting your body. There's a lot of things that take place when we're sleeping. For instance, with brain health, when we're sleeping, you have this lymphatic system, and that kind of cleans out the waste in our brain. It helps us think more clearly. It helps us bring in more memory from the day that we've experienced. It also gets out some of the toxins like the amyloid plaques and the proteins or some of the other stuff like that are associated with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and other brain disease. With the heart, when we're sleeping, during the day, especially with this generation where we're so busy and on the go and we're more in that sympathetic fight or flight mode, when we sleep, our heart has time to just chill and relax, and our lets our vessels kind of relax and just repair during sleep. Also, when we sleep, that's when your immune system gets recharged. Your T cells and B cells that help kind of fight infections and recognize it, that's when those are regenerated. So it also helps with immune health. Growth hormones are released. When we're younger, those are released to help with growth and development. But when we're older, that helps more with like muscle and tissue repair. Mood, we all know how we feel better when we wake up, less anxiety, less depression, things like that. So those are some of the benefits of sleep that we see.
Absolutely. And people also can crave more sugar if you haven't slept either.
So your hunger hormones are also influenced by sleep. You have something called leptin. That's highest when we sleep, and that tells our body that we're full. And that's more controlled by the fatty tissue in our body. And then you have something called ghrelin that tells us, hey, it's time to eat. So whenever we wake up in the middle of the night, that leptin level kind of declines, and it kind of wakes up the ghrelin that tells us, hey, let's go. It's time to I'm hungry. Let's go get something to eat. So usually with that, you crave more of the foods that you said, like carbs and processed foods, which can, with long-term sleep issues can lead to weight gain and other issues that is kind of like a cascade effect.
Absolutely. And how do hormones help with sleep?
Hormones are wonderful. For instance, in particular, related to sleep, you have cortisol and melatonin. Cortisol is our anti-sleep hormone, and melatonin is our sleep hormone. So typically when you wake up, that's when your cortisol level is the highest, and it helps us have more energy. It provides some blood sugar spikes so we have more energy and we can focus. It also helps us get through the day, increases our heart rate, things like that. And it should gradually decline during the day and be at its lowest when it's time to go to bed. And that's when melatonin kicks in. So melatonin is wonderful. It's a hormone and a neurotransmitter, and it's heavily influenced by light. So that kind of goes back to, why we don't need to have the phones and the computers in bed with us. But melatonin is a very strong antioxidant. So it helps us repair our tissues. It helps us get rid of waste while we're sleeping. it also helps with immune health, and most importantly, it helps us sleep. So if any of that balance is thrown off, cortisol is kind of like, it's good if it's functioning right during the day, but if it gets thrown off, it's kind of connected to everything that we'll talk about today that can lead to long-term medical illnesses and conditions.
Absolutely. And how does testosterone help with, with cortisol or melatonin and sleep?
Testosterone, it kind of competes with cortisol. Like if your cortisol is high, it decreases your testosterone. Testosterone is an anti-inflammatory, so it helps with muscle repair. It helps us stay asleep. It also helps us balance that circadian rhythm. It helps also with other hormonal balances and memory consolidation.
Absolutely. And for women too, how does progesterone help with sleep?
Progesterone is wonderful. If anybody ever took my progesterone away from me, I would fight them. This is coming from someone that had years of sleep issues in perimenopause, but when you hit perimenopause, that can happen 5 to 10 years before you hit menopause. Okay, so think of progesterone as our calming hormone, and progesterone kind of helps synthesize the GABA receptors in your brain. GABA is kind of like the strongest inhibitory hormone. So when you start losing that progesterone, you lose that GABA benefit of relaxing us and helping us fall asleep and stay asleep. And at the same time, you have the thing with progesterone, it just gradually declines in perimenopause, but then you have those fluctuations in estrogen. So then you can see increased anxiety, sleep issues, temperature dysregulation, things like that. So progesterone, especially taking that during the perimenopausal phase, typically helps with some of those symptoms and especially sleep.
Absolutely. I always say progesterone puts you asleep, testosterone keeps you asleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, obviously you talked about perimenopause, but depending on if you're female, male, different stages of life, when do we need more sleep? Do we all need the same amount of sleep, or what does that look like?
It's kind of different through our stages of life, and I'll just kind of hit more on like teenagers, just because they're kind of approaching more of that adult stage. But teenagers ideally need 8 to 10 hours of sleep. Do they get that? No. They are waking up early and going to practice before school, or getting up to study, or then they're in school all day and they have activities after school, and then they're staying up late studying, and then they're on their phones. But ideally, that's what teenagers need, but average, they get 6 to 8. So, with testosterone, we'll say in men, testosterone is it is produced more when we sleep. So we'll kind of get in the cycles of sleep in a minute, but like you have these cycles of sleep and you have these spikes of testosterone, but it actually peaks between 6 and 8 a.m. So if you're not getting that non-REM and REM sleep, it kind of affects testosterone in men or in boys, and we do see that in clinic. And then for teenagers, for females, that's kind of influenced by our menstrual cycle. Typically with that luteal phase, when you complete that and your progesterone just drops, you lose that benefit, and then you feel bad, you have the cramping and the PMS symptoms before your cycle, and then as your estrogen starts to rise, you can you have some of those, I guess, more like estrogen dominant symptoms that kind of interfere with sleep. As we progress, we hit a little bit on this with perimenopause, but as we start losing the progesterone, we get those estrogen dominant symptoms. Estrogen controls our temperature, so we get more hot flashes. A lot of people associate this perimenopausal phase, the first sign is hot flashes, but it's actually sleep. It's sleep symptoms. So typically with that, you have the mood swings, the anxiety, things like that.
would you say like 8 hours? Would you tell people to sleep?
Recommended for adults. We're not as active as these teenagers, and we're not still growing. So recommended is 7 to 9.
7 to 9. That's good to know. Yeah. I know it's funny. I used to be able to like stay up all night, be fine the next day. And then once you find out what sleep actually does, now I'm just like counting backwards. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I'm not getting 8 hours, like my brain and my skin, my gut. Yeah, it's funny. Once you know what sleep does, it's like, all right, I need to focus on sleep.
I get anxious if I think I can't sleep. I will get anxious because I went so many years without it. And, like, I'll just touch on this a little bit. A lot of times these females, when they go to their provider and with these symptoms, they get antidepressants. That was me, didn't help. They get sleep aids. It was me. I was on Ambien. That's wrong, yes. You get all this stuff, but it didn't help me. So now that I know what good sleep is as an adult, and like I said, do not take my progesterone away. I look forward to sleep, actually. I look forward to going to bed. I used to not look forward to it because I knew I wouldn't sleep. But now I'm just like, oh, it's time to sleep.
Absolutely. And then that's just like what we talked about a few minutes ago. It builds on everything else. So if you know you can't sleep, and then it's just, that's the time to relax, because thankfully I can sleep fine. But the nights that I can't, it takes you longer to fall asleep, I'm like, oh my gosh, the people that deal with this every single night.
Exactly. Yeah.
What are other things that affect sleep in a negative way?
Some people like their wine at night and it helps them sleep. But as we advance into perimenopause, you can have that glass of wine and you sleep, but then it has a rebound effect. So it initially attaches to those GABA receptors and help you relax and sleep. Then it has a rebound effect and it makes the glutamate rise and it kind of throws off that balance. Glutamate's kind of like your strongest stimulatory hormone. So it kind of throws that off. And then you can't sleep. And, these women will come in and like, I used to have a glass of wine at night and I could sleep and now I don't. We know caffeine can make us not sleep, especially if you take it in the afternoons. The type of exercises that you do, ideally it's best to do more of those HIIT classes, running, more of those more stimulatory type exercises during the day. And then if you're one of those that due to your schedule for whatever reason has to exercise at night, it's more to do more of a meditating type exercise like yoga, walking, things like that.
Absolutely. So let's go into the negative consequences of sleep, because you don't want to scare people, but there's so many studies that show like if you don't sleep well, your mortality is going to be cut so much shorter, different chronic diseases, cancers, all of that. So let's start with the brain.
Yeah. So with the brain, when I was talking earlier about the lymphatic system only works at night. So if you're not sleeping, it's not detoxing your brain. So you have these, the amyloid plaque buildup that we see with Alzheimer's and other buildups with other brain diseases. Your memory, you wake up, you have brain fog. You also can't function the next day at work or school. You can't recall or you have poor decision-making skills.
One of my sisters, who is in that, she needs the 8 to 10 hours as she's a teenager, loves to stay up. And I'm like, your brain's literally on fire the next day. This is not helping you. It's not helping anyone around you. And then she'll actually sleep and she'll be like, oh, I feel so much better. I'm like, yeah, it's amazing what sleep can do for you.
Exactly.
And then, I could talk about brain health all the time because it's your brain, right? And I even tell people that's why when people are like, oh, why are you on hormones? Why are you on testosterone? I'm like, one, day to day to keep me healthy. But two, if I could do something to protect my brain, why would I not? Especially for women, like we get dementia so much more than men. Of course, there's multi-factors, but if you can just focus on sleep and the benefits of brain health, and that's something you can control on your own every day, free of charge.
I read where one of the biggest fears for individuals, more so in females, for reasons you just said is getting dementia or Alzheimer's. And that is me. Like, I've noticed my memory is not what it used to be, but thankfully I'm doing stuff about it. But yeah, I think that's one of the biggest fears for some people or most people of their brain health.
I know. I was like reading the story. It was a football player. His wife just got diagnosed with like early onset dementia, maybe. And of course, I don't know these people, right? Just reading. And she was like in her like 50s. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what if she's just going through menopause? The benefits of hormones that could help. And who knows, right? But like you said, like you're doing things that could help, and just that providing that education, you may not get it everywhere at your doctor. But whenever I read those type of stories or hear it, I'm like, do you want to try hormones? Like maybe that could help.
I was listening to a podcast this morning, and it was talking about perimenopause. I love Jolene Brighton. They were just talking about the divorce rates during perimenopause. And it's just, and we kind of see some of that in clinic too, that improves after they start with hormone and thyroid therapy.
Absolutely. It's great to see the conversation around hormones is getting bigger and bigger, because it affects everything. It affects everything. And we don't know, especially for us, for women, our bodies go through incredible changes every month, starting when we were 12, 13, and we have no idea. We're just like, and then once you realize like, oh, this is why I feel this way. It doesn't make it better, but at least if you understand why and you're trying to do things that help. And yes, and that's what wellness is. It's like learning little things that could help. And then you had touched on it a little earlier, but sleep and immunity, kind of talk about that.
Yeah. So, you may recall like the days that you couldn't sleep for whatever reason for multiple days. And the next thing you know, you have a cold or an infection or something like that. But whenever we can't sleep, we don't have that protection from melatonin that helps build up those T cells and those B cells and those type cells that kind of recognize infection and kind of attacks it. So we lose that benefit, and then it does make us more prone to infections. I read another study in particular about people that work night shift. I was a night shift nurse, and it all makes sense to me now. But, melatonin is regulated by light. It's just, it's amazing how our body protects us. And when you work night shift, there was more increased, what's the word? There was more increased cases, I guess, of night shift workers having some type of infectious disease or illness, and even cancers, because you don't have that antioxidant benefit to help fight that off and build up your immune system.
Absolutely. And, people is like, don't realize that we have unhealthy cells in our body all the time. And sleep is like the one time your body can just focus on healing. And if you don't have that, then it just all builds on it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And too, kind of building off immunity, like insulin resistance with night shift workers and not getting enough sleep as well.
Yeah. It's never a good night's sleep. Yeah. Yeah. There was another study that was like, you're not supposed to use melatonin supplementation long term. It's just more like if you have jet lag from traveling, and if you do work night shift, just so you can fall asleep.
Now, one of my friends, she always worked like full-time night shift as a PA, and now she works part-time, and I'm like, you've got to stop. I'm like, it's like so bad for you. Or she'll say something, I'm like, yes. I'm like, because when was the last time you got like consecutive good sleep? She's like, I know. I'm like, yes. Now, of course we need that. Like, we're so thankful. I just feel so bad.
I worked it for 3 years, and I can remember going, okay, what's today's date? Today? Do I work today?
And you talked about the benefits of hormones with sleep, but what happens to our hormones if we don't get enough sleep?
Yeah, so when you don't get enough sleep, it kind of throws off that hypothalamus pituitary regulation that kind of helps us control all of our hormones. So that gets thrown off. You know, again, like you said, we're out of balance with the cortisol and melatonin. Cortisol is the end result of everything that when we get out of whack, and that leads to a whole stream of issues too. But yeah, so like for males, for instance, when you don't sleep, men start losing testosterone at age 30, 1 to 2%. Men kind of present differently than females. For men, it's more of a physical symptoms. With that low testosterone, they tend to have more fat in their chest, their necks, and they're more diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea. Females, they do have lower testosterone and can have some of those symptoms, but females tend to have more emotional symptoms, fatigue, anxiety, depression, and then, you get those medications we talked about earlier. Yeah. And in men, just fertility in general is affected mainly because you don't have, for men, that testosterone level. There was a study, even in healthy men, if they're not getting adequate sleep, their circulating testosterone can decrease by 30%. So imagine how it is in someone that's not healthy.
Exactly. And we're already low, like you said, and then not sleeping.
The sperm count, the motility, the quality is not ideal. So that can increase your risk of fertility issues. And for females, when you don't sleep, it has an effect on your progesterone being produced. So then it goes back to those estrogen dominant symptoms and irregular cycles, no ovulation, infertility. And there was one study that with sleep issues, I don't remember the percentage, but you have a higher risk of miscarriages in your first trimester if you have sleep issues. So it's important, with reproductive health.
Absolutely. And I think I think we're not talking about it as much as we should, because you just see all these like stats in like 20 years, guys aren't going to have sperm anymore. And it's like, shouldn't we be concerned? But, and two, I feel like so many, providers will jump to IVF, and IVF's an incredible, invention. But like you said, oh wait, I can sleep to build my progesterone, which can help me, get pregnant, keep my pregnancy. There's so many things out there that should be talked about, I think, more.
A lot more natural and not as expensive treatments. Yeah.
That's the thing. I'm like, as a woman, do you not realize what IVF, I mean, I've never gone through IVF, does to your mind, your body, so many things. You're just pumping yourself of such high hormones. Yeah. And two, like you brought up, guys, fertility is 50-50. But women usually get she's not getting pregnant. It's let's look at the whole picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also read, and I don't know if this is true, that morning sickness can be dependent on the health of a man's sperm.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah.
I'm like, that's interesting. So I'm like, okay, so the woman has to suffer I'm like, awesome. That's really nice. Yeah.
It's their fault.
Right? Yeah. And you kind of touched on a little bit, but the mental health aspect of not sleeping.
So when you don't sleep, it kind of affects the serotonin, especially when you're having fluctuations in estrogen, because we need estrogen for serotonin production and melatonin production. So if that's low already, and if you're having swings in estrogen, or if you don't have estrogen, you're not going to make that serotonin. You're going to have anxiety, depression. You're not going to have melatonin. You're going to have those increased cortisol levels that we have talked about many times. So yeah, And so that's typically what we see.
What about, and we kind of touched on this with like insulin resistant, but metabolic diseases?
So all of it kind of plays a role in metabolic disease. So everything we touched on that's going on when you're sleeping and how it's disrupted when you don't sleep. So when you're not sleeping, it raises your cortisol, raises your blood glucose long term. That leads to weight gain, leads to high blood pressure. When you have high blood pressure, your vessels tend to stiffen, so you can have atherosclerosis. The lymphatic system is not detoxing your brain because of that hypertension. You don't have good flow, so you are increased risk for those brain disorders that we talked about. So usually, back to the metabolic disorders, you are increased risk of like hypertension, heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, and then throw in your immune system is out of whack. So it leads to even more pronounced symptoms.
Absolutely. So I would say we should definitely focus on sleeping.
Yes.
And the good thing is there's so much we can do to help support our sleep. One, go to sleep, but also things that will help support our sleep. So what are some lifestyle things that, you may talk to your patients with or that you do yourself to help optimize sleep?
So ideally, it would be to not watch TV, not get behind your computer, not work at night, not stay on your phone 2 hours before bedtime. But ideally, we would say an hour. So not to have your phone by the nightstand. Anytime somebody sends you a message or you get that whatever message that makes your screen light up, I will wake up, even with that little bit of light stimulation. So just trying to have your phone in a different place where you're not tempted to go, look at it when you wake up and can't fall back asleep. Temperature, when we're hot, we don't sleep. So just turning down the thermostat at bedtime, ideally like 65 to 67. Blackout blinds are great. They keep the light from coming in, obviously. If you do have pets, maybe don't let those pets sleep with you at night, like I do. Yeah, I wake up at 4 a.m. every morning wanting water from the sink. But just things like that. And we talked about exercise. The type of exercise that you do before bedtime makes a huge difference. The foods that you eat also makes a big difference. If you're eating high carb foods at bedtime, that's going to raise your blood sugar and your cortisol and interfere with sleep. Try to do more protein and fiber type foods. Alcohol, we touched on. Caffeine, we touched on. Things like that.
Absolutely. Any supplements that you recommend to help sleep?
Magnesium glycinate is wonderful. Magnesium glycinate just kind of helps your whole body relax. It not only helps your brain relax and kind of makes those GABA receptors more sensitive, but it also helps with joint pain. So we're not aching so much during sleep. Melatonin, we talked about that, but just short term, that's just better for jet lag and night shift workers. There's GABA. GABA and L-theanine work great together. Those L-theanine is actually in green tea, so it helps with the dopamine and the serotonin production. It also helps with melatonin production. Vitamin C is good if your immune system, if you've got a cold or something like that, that typically will help too. And I love a good Epsom salt bath. It's not supplement, but it's just wonderful to sit and soak in an Epsom salt bath.
I know. It's funny when people are like, if you could tell one person, one supplement to take. And of course, I want to say vitamin D because it's a hormone, but I'm like, it's magnesium. Like, it helps. I'm like, it has like 500 different chemical reactions in your body. And like you said, I describe it the same way you do. I'm like, it just naturally calms your body. And once you say that to someone, they're like, oh, I should take that. I'm like, yes, everyone should take it.
Make sure it's the glycinate. There's so many different magnesiums out there.
So many different. Yeah, make sure it's glycinate.
Yes.
I know, because there's of course, supplements across the board, but I think especially magnesium, because people like talk about it and want it for sleep. Sometimes these magnesium powders are straight sugar. And I'm like, that's what you're taking at bed? Yes, that is not going to help you.
And even if it says it's all natural and it doesn't have additives, it does. A lot of it does.
And then, anything, I know we talked a lot with hormones and sleep, but anything else that you would want to add of how hormones help with sleep?
Yeah, so in particular, what we see in clinic when someone comes in and they start testosterone and estrogen and progesterone, they all work together. It's like you said, testosterone helps you stay asleep. Progesterone helps you fall asleep. But estrogen helps with temperature regulation and mood, so you feel good when you go to sleep. We haven't really touched on thyroid, but thyroid helps too. We see a lot of hypothyroidism in our clinic, and that is when you're not producing enough thyroid hormones. So sluggish thyroid, sluggish everything. So that affects our circadian rhythm. It also desensitizes those GABA receptors. So we've got to get your thyroid working and optimized too.
I was thinking about thyroid too. People forget, or they don't realize, or you go to the doctor for one thing and you're just looking at that one thing, but our entire body works together. And especially like all of our systems work together. And that's why you need to have the right balance, the optimal balance, to make sure that, obviously we're talking about sleep, but for how any functions are going to work in your body.
Yeah. And I haven't appreciated how the body works together until I started really working here, because I'm an old nurse. I finished school I'm not going to say when I finished nursing school, but we focus more on this is your cardiovascular system, and this is your pulmonary system, and this is your, neuro system. We didn't make that interconnectedness like we do now. And they do, they all work together, and they build each other up, their team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know, because that's like not how you're taught in school, right? And then once you're like practicing, then you're focusing on what you're focusing on. And I think sometimes, it's like once you're on your own journey, whether it's personally or work, and then you start building on realizing, wait, our entire body works together.
Yes. And if one thing's not working, it affects the other. So.
And two, I think is a good reminder, things take time and wellness takes time. And, you're not going to have sleep issues for the past 15 years. And one day it's all going to be better. I would say sleep is usually the first thing that we do see people say it really helps. But because obviously hormones play such a key role. But I think also remembering not to stare at your phone till 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Anything else that we missed on sleep?
I wanted to just kind of touch on the stages of sleep, because it's real important. So you have non-REM sleep and you have REM sleep. And think of non-REM sleep, that is your deep sleep. And most of that occurs in the first half of your sleep cycle. And you have these sleep cycles that they start over about every 90 minutes. So in deep sleep, think of that as physical repair. That's when your IGF is released. That's when your muscles and your tissues and things like that are being more repaired. REM sleep is that's more in the second half of sleep, but that's more with emotional healing. So that helps with memory, learning, the decision making that goes along with it, your emotions. And interestingly, I didn't know this. Probably everybody knows this but me, but your body is actually paralyzed when you're in REM sleep. Did you know that? And the reason it is because that's when you have vivid dreams. And so it keeps you from acting out on those dreams. But
that's so interesting.
Your muscles are relaxed in deep sleep, but they're paralyzed in your body's paralyzed. Of course, the breathing and the rapid eye movement. And it's just so you can process more and not react to those emotions that are kind of going on. That's when your brain's the most active, is in REM sleep, during sleep.
I do have some crazy dreams. Very vivid. Yeah. It's so funny, that people don't have vivid dreams. I'm like, wow.
Yeah. So these, a lot more people have these mattresses that monitor their sleep, or the watches, or the Oura rings. So you can kind of track what you're getting more or less of, and kind of track, oh, okay, well, I had more REM sleep. So, you can kind of, it's fun to play around, not play around with because it's affecting your sleep, but kind of know what's going on, like you said before.
Absolutely. And you had touched on it before, but I think it's so important to repeat it again. Like talking about the sleep cycles and what your body's doing in each of them. When you drink alcohol, you're not getting in any of these cycles. So your body can't do any things, or like why people wake up anxious after they drink, or why they're a little depressed. It goes straight back to the alcohol. Do you have an Oura ring?
I don't. I have a watch that I will sometimes sleep with, but I can't tell you. My sleep is good until my cat. Yeah. I fall asleep within 30 minutes of taking my progesterone, and if anybody broke into my house or I would like, I don't care. My sleepings do not bother me.
Right? Yeah, I don't either. And cause same thing, like I sleep well, so I don't want to get like an Oura ring and then it's telling me that I'm not sleeping well. Like I can't get in my head about it. Yeah. But it is very interesting.
Yeah, a lot of times we'll talk to patients. They're like, "Well, my Oura ring told me last night I only got 85%."
And then I like, wait, am I tired? But I thought I wasn't tired. Yeah.
I don't feel like I should be tired.
But my ring is telling me I did not sleep well. Yeah. I mean, our bodies are incredible, and I think we forget that. Like sometimes I'll just be sitting here, I'll be like, wow, like thinking about like what my cells are doing right now to keep me alive.
Constantly protecting us.
It is. And we just have to give it the right things, especially in this environment that we live in. It's trying to do all the things to not help us sleep, not help us to be healthy.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's why I'm like trying to, my goal is to get my phone out of my room at night, because like the EMFs and the Wi-Fi. So I make sure like all Wi-Fi off, Bluetooth. I don't even keep Bluetooth on. I'm one of those, but like little by little, my goal is to get the phone completely out.
And a lot of people have a hard time with that because they use alarm systems now. Alarms now to wake up. Or, if you have kids, if there's an emergency,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I have sometimes just kept mine still in the room, but just instead of my nightstand, across the room on my dresser.
Absolutely. I know people who have them like right next to their brain. I'm like, no, I'm like, put it away. Like, one of my friends, she's like, oh yeah, like I usually fall asleep when it's under my pillow. And I'm like, no. I'm like, that is not good. Let's move it away from your bed for your poor brain.
Not only do you feel the vibration or hear the ring, but the light just kind of show up around the surrounding pillow.
I'm like, that's not good. That can't be good for anything.
That's when you're codependent on your phone.
Correct. When that could be a whole nother conversation. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. This was great. I hope people realize, I think just the power of sleep, right? Like sleep can help in so many ways. And I think sometimes we get caught up in all the wellness things, how to be healthy, and sleep is a great thing and easy to control.
Yeah. And just trying to find the root cause of why you're not sleeping instead of taking these other prescription meds that kind of have their side effects of their own. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was talking about this yesterday, like usually around postpartum or perimenopause, menopause is when women usually get a concoction of a sleep aid, anti-anxiety, depressant, maybe a stimulant, when it really can go back to hormones, which then is affecting all the things that we're talking about.
Yeah. And sleep can be one of the most, addictive. I don't want to say personality, but addictions, because like you said, you're drinking caffeine or taking Adderall in the morning, and then it's getting you through the day, and then you have to take an antidepressant or an Ambien.
Right. It's something to bring you down. Exactly. Your body's just up and down.
It's an addictive cycle.
It is. Yeah. Well, thank you. This was great.
Thank you, Tyler. I enjoyed it.
This has been a production of Optimal Bio. Optimal Bio is CEO Tylar Brannon, Medical Director Greg Brannon, podcast host Tyler Brannon. The podcast can be found on our website, optimalbio.com, on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Our theme song is Sunwave by Paradiso, provided by Epidemic Sound.